Let's talk about where we can find accurate drug information. The first place you can look certainly is the label on the drug package itself. There are certain things that are required to be on that package. Obviously, the name. In this example label, prednisone this is a generic name. Prednisone has been around a long time, so there are not, there are some that are just sold under that name, just prednisone. And I believe the reason why the last four letters are capitalized is there is another form of this drug that is biologically more available in some species than others, which is called prednisolone. So it's probably just capitalized to keep that confusion from happening between one drug and the other. There is on this label, there's how many milligrams, there's the um, drug form. It's a tablet. There's 100 tablets in this bottle. It tells you how to store the drug over here. It tells you where it was manufactured, and it would have an expiration date and a control number. And the control number would be really important if you found that every animal you gave it to suffered certain adverse drug reactions. You would want to call the drug company and report that and have that control number available because it just might be that batch of drugs that was incorrectly manufactured. Also, as part of the packaging, there's often a package insert. And this is a folded up bunch of paper. You'll see some of these in lab. They're sometimes stuck to the top of the bottle or the side of the bottle. And they contain a lot more information on them. That is all the labeled information. So if it's in that package insert, if it's on the label of the drug, it's considered labeled information. You can also get this information on the internet going to the manufacturer's site. If you're using information in a formulary, let's say, we're going to do some exercises with formularies in our class, or it's coming from, say, a journal or a study, published study, something like that, or you hear an amount in a conference and you jot it down and you use that particular dosage. That's considered extra label. And there are some pretty strict requirements that are required with using drugs in an extra label fashion. So what is extra label drug use? We're going to abbreviate it ELDU. There's going to be some acronyms in this class, and you're going to just have to learn them. And this is one of them, extra label drug use. And the FDA definition of it is actual use or intended use of a drug in an animal in a manner that is not in accordance with the approved labeling. So we have to look at what the manufacturer, what the drug company has listed for the species that you can use the drug in and use it according to what they have given in their information. If it's not listed in there, then it's going to be extra label drug use. So here's some things that it includes, but not necessarily limited to because people can get creative. But these are the typical ways that drugs are used in an extra label manner. Use in a species not listed in the labeling. It would be nice if there were studies done, clinical trials and all of that, and labeled drugs for llamas and alpacas, but we don't have vaccines typically for these species. And so drugs just are not studied in all of the species. So it's a given in many of them that we will be using the drugs in an extra label manner for pocket pets, these small ruminants. Use for indication. So indication is a disease state or condition for the animal that we're going to use a drug to treat. So indication is the word for a condition or disease. So use for indications not listed in the labeling. And these come up sometimes in it seemed to work, let's say, in a human patient, but even though it's not listed for a particular species, we're going to try it now in an animal species. Use at dosage levels, frequencies, or routes of administration. So we're going to, if we use drugs at a different dosage, so more amounts per pound of the animal, and let's say we're going to give it 3 times a day as opposed to twice a day, or we're going to give it orally as opposed to IV, something like that. That any of those things, any of those different ways of using it than what it's labeled for is extra label drug use. And then deviation from labeled withdrawal time based on these different uses. So we're going to deviate from the labeled withdrawal times if we're going to use a drug in extra labelly. I'm going to explain that again in a minute, but we definitely will not be using the labeled withdrawal time if we're using a drug in an extra labeled manner. So there are some requirements for using drugs in an extra label manner, and that is that it has to be ordered by a licensed veterinarian. A valid VCPR or veterinarian client patient relationship must exist. So the veterinarian needs to have a professional relationship with the owner and have seen the animal. The health of the animal would otherwise be threatened if we do not use the drug. So you must have a condition that needs to be treated. In the past, there has been use of drugs by food animal producers to increase the weight gain of food animals, and that's been done with the use of antibiotics, and that is no longer a permissible use of a drug extra labelly. The last condition here is that no FDA approved veterinary drug exists, or in the labeled dosage or drug regimen, it would be ineffective. So if there is a drug that already exists, but we're using it in a different manner, then that is going to be extra label. Different manner in the way that it's labeled to be used. There's some additional requirements for food animals because when we're using a drug that is in a not labeled fashion, we are potentially exposing people to a drug in a way that has not been studied. So the additional requirements are that there's going to be an extended withdrawal time or period. A withdrawal time or period is the time from when the last dose of a drug is given to an animal and when it can go to market, or when milk can be collected for human consumption, or eggs collected for human consumption. Any food product has to have a time, once it's going to market and potentially getting into the human food chain, there has to be a period of time between when that last drug dose was given and when that product can go to people. And that has been studied with drugs that are given to food animals. But we're going to play it extra safe, and if we're using a drug in a different manner, we're going to extend that withdrawal time. The veterinarian is going to take responsibility for that time frame, and there are some guidelines, and we'll talk more about withdrawal times in the next chapter. The veterinarian is responsible for the next 2 things, and that is the identity of the animal has to be maintained, and the new withdrawal time has to be observed, and the veterinarian needs to be the one that is accountable for this. So they need to relay the information to the owner. They may want to double check with the owner in certain cases, but they are responsible for making sure that it's known which animal got a particular treatment and that the new withdrawal time was observed. If there is no information about human safety in a drug that's used in a food animal, the animal cannot enter the food chain. Its products cannot enter the food chain. The FDA does not want, the Food and Drug Administration does not want drugs to enter the food chain that if we do not know what the effects may be.